My name is Martha. I am an occupational therapist. I specialise in neurodivergent mental health. So today I will talk about sensory processing. I'll use sensory integration as well as kind of interchangeably. But really what I want to talk about today is the sensory mindset. So this talk is very much for mental health clinicians, and it's going to look at practical tips and tricks and things to consider for your own practice. So sensory integration is something that there can be a bit of smoke and mirrors around, and a real sense that you need to be an expert in order to look at it or to have a lens around it. And what I really want you to get out of today is a sense that you really don't need to be an expert to have a sensory lens. It's really a crucial part of all mental health intervention, and it's something that mental health professionals are already doing. Sensory integration, the grandmother as such of sensory integration is Dr. Jane Ayres. And really what it is it's how your mind interprets our sensory environment, both external and internal, and how does our brain use that information in order to respond. So it is really important thing to consider. And we look at the statistics and the research, we know that between 63 to 93% of autistic individuals have reported sensory processing differences. But we also know that 66% of neurodivergent individuals report a direct impact of that on their mental health. And we think about that within a larger concept. We've already touched on today, I suppose, really when we look at the population of the world, current research would say there's between 15 and 20% who are neurodivergent. We know that there is still underdiagnosis. We know that 30% of children diagnosed with ADHD have also a diagnosis of anxiety disorder. And the co-occurring rates between mental health and neurodiversity or neurodivergency can be between 40 to 80%. But one statistic that's always stuck with me is this one around peer rejection. So some research would state that neurodivergent individuals receive up to 85% more social rejection before their 18th birthday. So we think about that within the concept of self-esteem, within self-worth, and within the need for mental health services really to be, I suppose, providing a platform for neurodivergent individuals to get the support that they need. But we can't really do that without incorporating a sensory lens. So there's a short video now. I can see some MHST Nottinghamshire heads, so this won't be too new for you guys. But I want you to watch this video, and I want you to think when you're watching this video to look out for the anxiety management strategies that this young person is already trying to use.
One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. No, Alex. No, it's fine, isn't it? It's fine. I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
So this video was devised by the National Autistic Society, but it offers a good insight, I suppose, into young people's experiences of their sensory world. And really, when we think about that, what we are looking at is we're looking at authentic regulation. So really, when we think about the idea of being regulated and being in a state where we can concentrate, we can engage, we can take in new information, really we're looking for the trifecta of sensory, emotional, and cognitive. And these systems are constantly hitting off each other. And for neurodivergent individuals, if you think about this Venn diagram, it's actually been a bit more smushed together. The overlap is a bit more astute, a bit more tighter. So within that realm, I suppose, without looking at the sensory, we can't fully look at the emotional, or we can't fully look at the cognitive. But at the same way, without the emotional or the cognitive, we also can't look at the sensory. And that's really where I hope to see mental health services entering more into is that integrated way of sort of working with neurodivergent mental health. So we hear about the five senses growing up. I'm not going to go into a full TED talk on the senses, don't worry. But sight, smell, hearing, taste, touch, we're pretty good at that. We're pretty familiar with that. But I want to draw some attention today on the bottom three. So vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoceptive. And the reason for this is that these three senses are actually the most crucial for our ability to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel regulated. And without, I suppose, awareness of these senses, it may kind of send us down the wrong path from a clinical perspective. So when we look at proprioceptive and vestibular, for today, I'm going to put them together. Your proprioceptive is your motor sense, your sense of where your body is in relation to itself. So really what happens here is there's little spindles within our muscles that send information up to our brain that allow us to motor plan. They allow us to know how much pressure I need to put in order to grip a glass or push a door. But they're also crucial to allow us to feel secure and to know where our body is in relation to itself in order to feel safe. Our vestibular system is often known as our balance system, but it's a little bit more than that. It's also knowing where our body is in relation to our environment. So are we moving? Are we stationary? Do we need to dodge something? It's really important, again, for that feeling of being secure. So I have some signs and symptoms up here of how you might know if someone is understimulated or overstimulated. I will put it as a disclaimer, there obviously can be other reasons for this, but it's just having that sensory lens and that curiosity with it to go, oh, is it actually sensory? So signs of being understimulated, you may notice lethargic, low energy, that they're not really able to concentrate. They might look to seek sensory input. So they might be kind of rocking, they might be tapping their legs, they might be kind of fidgeting around, they could be rolling their neck, rolling their shoulders, or signs that they're overstimulated. And this can be quite common if you have a young person coming into you later in the afternoon. After a full day of school, maybe they've just been running around the yard. And what you might see there is this sort of pale complexion. They might say they're feeling dizzy or feeling sick, and they might just appear a little bit wiped out. Or, which is always fun with sensory work, they could be really hyper. It could be that they were understimulated, looked for sensory input, and then became overstimulated, and now they're a bit dysregulated. Some things to consider within the therapeutic space are, so if someone is coming in understimulated, look at incorporating movement into your practice. So full body movements, potentially spinning around in both directions, push-ups, jumping jacks, even just popping their head between their legs can be enough to give a bit of blood flow to the vestibular system. Or if they're overstimulated, offering alternatives. So do they need to lie down? Do they need to have maybe a gentle rock back and forth? If they are already using, things like weighted blankets or even like self hugs, incorporating that within the space, allowing permission to say, yeah, bring that into the therapy room, and giving them a bit more autonomy within the space. The Alert program is a program that was devised back in the 90s by two occupational therapists in the United States. It was devised for schools, but it's very relevant for clinicians as well. And it's definitely one to check out if you are interested in, I suppose, looking at this a bit further. Interoceptive is coined as the new sense. Now, to be fair, interoception isn't that new. It's been around since the early 1900s. It's actually designed by psychologists who were looking to see how our physical bodies experience emotion. But we know for neurodivergent individuals, especially autistic individuals, they have a different interoceptive processing. And when we think about interoception, we often think about things like needing to urinate or the ability to know that you're thirsty or these more physiological symptoms. But I want you to think about that question, how do you feel? Because how do you feel for a neurodivergent mind is a huge question. But if you think about even within the sensory lens, they may not actually experience the same symptoms or sensations of anxiety, the same physiological symptoms, maybe of anger that we'd expect. So for example, I had a autistic young person who used to describe butterflies in his hands, or he'd say, my toes are going cold. And that's how he was starting to recognize the early signs of anxiety building within him. What you'll see with under-responsivity is that you may also have this sort of explosion of emotional, outburst as such. And that can be because the senses inside need a higher threshold in order to be active. So you basically get this build up without the brain recognizing it, and then this boom. Alternatively, you can also have an over-responsivity. So sometimes you might see a young person and they're really aware of their heart rate, they're really aware of their thirst or the need to urinate. And this obviously can create much higher levels of distress and dysfunction. But I suppose by offering that sensory lens, it's a very tangible entry point for a lot of our neurodivergent clients. So instead of talking about things that we know aren't fluffy, but to the neurodivergent brain, might be a bit fluffy around emotional labeling or how are you feeling, by offering that sensory, that real direct physical element, it can be a way of sort of getting it in and then taking that in and applying it then to your more traditional modes of practice. So I want you to think about your current practice. Because often when I talk about sensory integration, people say, oh, I've never heard about it. I've never really done much with it. But truthfully, clinicians are doing this every single day. We do it in our grounding exercises, our 5-4-3-2-1 PTSD. We do it in our self-harm reduction. So when we're looking at, using ice cubes, snapping bands, we're using our sensory system to help modulate ourselves in order to calm our emotional system. In our self-care box, most of them are fully packed with loads of sensory integration tools and tips. We do it with box breathing. That's your interoceptive system, looking at calming your vagal nerve, looking at calming your nervous system in order to allow you again to sort of bring in that frontal lobe a bit more to ground your thoughts. Environmental layout we do all the time as well within the practice. Soft furnishings, offering friendly colors, offering a warm environment. That is actually all using your sensory environment in order to support to feel grounded. So if we think about in session, so when we're tangibly in a room with a young person, what things might be useful to consider? So environmental layout is a pretty obvious one that most people think about. So offering alternative seating options can be really useful. So sometimes that might be even putting a cushion on the floor to allow them to sit on the ground, allowing them to move around, allow them to sit in funny positions, whatever works for them. But it can just be a way of being a bit more affirmative in what you're offering. One thing in clinical spaces is that clinicians typically sit closest to the door, and that's obviously part of safety and everything else. But one thing to consider is there a frosted glass behind you? Is there movement? Is there visual distraction? Can you hear the radio coming in from the waiting area? So just even yourselves sitting into the space and sort of recognizing these things. And then from that, then I suppose recognizing, is that going to be a bit dysregulating for this young person coming in? Is there anything I can do to adapt the environment to support that? Offering sensory regulating opportunities is a really, really useful tool. So having things like fidgets, having sensory, tools and toys, having opportunities even for mindful drawing or that more side-by-side approach can help to support that bit of regulation. And also, I suppose, offering that out from the onset as this is a space where we allow this. This is a space where we want you to do this. Not taking for granted that they're just going to come in and do it. And if they haven't had any intervention, they mightn't even be aware that these things exist. So by offering these tools and allowing them to kind of, I suppose, access them for themselves, it can increase the autonomy, increase the self-esteem, and it can be a little side-by-side piece as well as the traditional interventions. The other thing to say would be around movement. So do, really encouraging movement. Naomi, your case study at the beginning was brilliant. Going outside, recognizing that client-centered approach, recognizing movement, meeting them where they're at. So recognizing as well that for some of our young people, if they're pacing, they actually may be regulated. Them pacing might be their ability to concentrate. And without the pacing, they can't concentrate. So if we're thinking about the concept of being able to attend and being able to listen and to take on board new strategies, we really need to have that as a young person centered. Other things to offer around neuroaffirmative culture is, I suppose, when you're sending out that introductory letter, state in it that it's a neuroaffirmative culture, offer, I suppose, even photographs of what to expect of the space, and offering, I suppose, the sense that we want you to come in here and not have to mask and not have to have any barriers, and not taking that for granted that they know that that is the case, because those small things often mean a lot to those individuals and allow them then to feel a bit more safe, a bit more grounded. And realistically, as a clinician, you're going to build up rapport quicker by doing that. I have put together a little clinician resource pack that I think Naomi's going to email out that just has links and other tips and tricks and a bit more in-depth information about sensory processing. So these are just some considerations for your intervention. So mindfulness is an incredible tool, and I think people have recognized now that it is a very good tool for neurodivergent minds also. It's just about tweaking it so that they can engage. One thing is that if you have, for example, a young person who has high sensory needs, incorporate movement as part of that. So allowing them to sort of burn off that energy so that they can sit in and do mindfulness. Even by bookending it with movement on either side can be a nice way of allowing them to feel secure within it. For neurodivergent minds, be really blunt and be really clear about why mindfulness works, what it is, why we use it. Because without that, in order for the mind, that neurodivergent mind to really latch in and to concentrate, if there isn't a purpose or an understanding as to the why, it's very hard for that mind to engage at a neurological level. So it's just something to consider. If you're noticing that certain environments are high trigger environments for that young person, do consider things like sensory checklists. Are there certain environments where they are noticing that their anxiety is much worse? Having that sensory lens to go, yes, of course, there may be anxiety or memory or other impact factors, but also is sensory contributing to this? Is there anything that we can do on a really practical level to just reduce that sensory input so that they can use their anxiety management strategies? Psychoeducation is crucial. Neurodivergent individuals are the best problem solvers I've ever worked with once they are explained and sort of explained why, the why of it. It's something that I often find, especially with autistic young people I've worked with, is once you crack the code, they'll come back in with all these fantastic strategies. And it is something just to be really mindful of. Don't underestimate the power of education around it. And finally, the last thing I'll touch on is sensory affirmative strategies. Sensory differences can be an incredible tool as a therapist to work with. Not only can you become, I suppose, overly stimulated, but you can experience different sensory experiences at a much richer level. So in kind of using that as a strength, when you look at your sensory self-care, they may actually have really pleasurable experiences or experiences that they can connect with their sensory world in a way that neurotypicals can't. So really building up their self-esteem and building up the self-worth around that and using it as a tool to increase the self-awareness in a way that can be then transferred over to maybe traditional anxiety management or anger management work. But for a lot of young people, when they recognize that they can actually do something really practical and tangible to help their sensory system, it can just be a very good buy-in and a very good awareness raising of, well, if I can do it with this, maybe I can do it with my anxiety, maybe I can do it with my anger. And I suppose those knock-on effects can be really, really powerful to be used as well. So I put the ADHD Foundation up here, and I found out this morning it's gone into liquidation. So that is terrible news. They do still have some things on their website. They have fantastic resources. It comes back to what we were talking about earlier around funding. They are a charitable organisation, and really there is need for more pressure on, I think, parliaments across the world to be recognising that money is needed really to drive this change. But other resources are the National Autism Society, NAS. They offer fantastic resources. They also offer professional trainings. The Anna Freud Institute also offers very good professional trainings. The Alert program is a really, really good, simple program. It basically looks at your sensory system like an engine of a car, and it's using that, I suppose, euphemism to see how's your engine running today. Is it running too high? Is it running too low? But it's really concrete and it's well researched, and they do offer training as well. Especially a lot of CBT therapists find it quite useful because it can complement it quite well. And then talking therapies have fantastic clinician guides, so just ways to make your practice more neuroaffirmative. The resource pack I'll send out as well will have a lot more kind of links to tips and tricks and guidelines around that as well. Finally, just to say thank you for being here. I think right now everything that's happening is happening in the world. We need mental health professionals more than ever. It's not an easy feat to be a mental health professional within that context. But the fact that so many people have turned up today that are still looking to continue to expand their practice, that still want to learn more, is just such an inspiring space to be within. So just to say thank you really authentically and genuinely for being here, because really, your clients are just so lucky to have you, and I don't think it's said enough. And yeah, I'm really glad that you're all here today.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say, we didn't say, but you founded an organisation in Ireland, the Sensory Coach, and so your details are on the screen now as well, where people can look at that as well, share that resource, and that you are a qualified occupational therapist who's also specialised in sensory integration. So thank you very much again for the presentation and for those practical strategies that we can put in place.
Can I put a plug in really quick?
Sure.
I've just launched my clinician series. So it's a 2-part series for clinicians who are looking to, I suppose, learn more about neuroaffirmative approaches and sensory processing within the mental health space. It's open to mental health professionals from all backgrounds, and you can find out more information on my website.